Some ships are born great, some ships achieve greatness, and some ships have greatness thrust upon them. And then there are ships like the USS William D. Porter, a ship so catastrophically clumsy, so unbelievably accident-prone, it carved its name into naval history for all the wrong reasons. This isn't really a story of heroism or valor. It's the story of a 2,000-ton floating calamity that nearly succeeded in assassinating the President of the United States. But as you'll see, that was just a warm-up act. For a career so cursed, its own crew couldn't believe their luck when it was all over. This is the story of the unluckiest ship in the U.S. Navy, a vessel so infamous they called her the Willie D. And trust me, it was not a term of endearment. November 14th, 1943. In the middle of the Atlantic, a top-secret convoy is slicing through the waves. On board the magnificent battleship USS Iowa is arguably the most important man in the world, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's on his way to the Tehran Conference, a clandestine meeting with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin that will shape the very course of World War II. The mission is so secret, the entire fleet is under strict radio silence. Suddenly, on the bridge of one of the escort destroyers, the USS William D. Porter, absolute panic erupts. A live torpedo has just been launched, and it's screaming through the water on a direct course for the USS Iowa. The U.S. Navy is about to accidentally assassinate its own commander-in-chief. This is the story of how that happened, and why for the Willie D, it was just another Tuesday. The story of the USS William D. Porter, or Willie D., begins not with a bang, but with a scrape. Commissioned on July 6, 1943, she was a Fletcher-class destroyer, one of the hundreds of workhorse tin cans being churned out by American shipyards. Like a lot of ships at the time, her crew was mostly fresh-faced recruits, young men pulled from schools and farms who had often never even seen the ocean, let alone a complex war machine. Their commander was Lieutenant Commander Wilfred A. Walter, a man on the fast track whose career was about to take a very sharp, very unfortunate detour. The bad omens started immediately. In November 1943, the Willie D. got her first big assignment, joining the escort for the battleship USS Iowa, which was secretly carrying President Roosevelt across the Atlantic. On November 12th, as the Porter was getting ready to leave port in Norfolk, Virginia, her career of chaos began. In a moment of what you can only call spectacular clumsiness, the crew failed to properly raise the anchor. As the ship moved, the forgotten anchor dragged along the side of a neighboring destroyer, ripping off its railings and lifeboat mounts before finally dropping into the water. The Willie D., however, was barely scratched. It was a sign of things to come. Chaos would follow this ship, but the ship itself often seemed bizarrely immune. The very next day, now at sea with the presidential convoy, the Willie D. struck again. Suddenly, a massive underwater explosion rocked the fleet. Every ship, including the Iowa, immediately began evasive maneuvers, assuming they were under attack from a German U-boat. Alarms blared, men scrambled to battle stations, and the hunt was on. But there was no U-boat. The culprit was, of course, the Willie D. A depth charge, which hadn't been properly secured, had simply rolled off the stern and detonated. A sheepish message had to be sent to the flagship, informing the admiral that it was just a false alarm. You can just imagine the reception that got. But the Willie D.'s one-ship disaster tour wasn't over. Shortly after the depth charge incident, a freak wave crashed over the destroyer. It swept equipment from the deck and, tragically, washed one sailor overboard into the Atlantic. He was never seen again. As if that wasn't enough, the same wave flooded the ship's fire rooms, killing the boilers, and leaving the Porter dead in the water as the rest of the convoy sailed on. Breaking strict radio silence, the crippled destroyer had to inform the Iowa that it had fallen behind. In just 48 hours, the USS William D. Porter had damaged an Allied ship, faked a U-boat attack, lost a crewman, and stalled out in the middle of the ocean, all while on the most sensitive mission imaginable. This ship didn't just feel unlucky, it felt actively malevolent, and the main event hadn't even started yet. 2 days into this cursed voyage on November 14th, President Roosevelt, a former assistant secretary of the Navy, wanted to see the fleet in action. He requested a demonstration of the USS Iowa's anti-aircraft guns. The battleship's crew launched weather balloons, and its gunners filled the sky with flak, putting on a great show for the president. The escort destroyers were also ordered to run drills, including a simulated torpedo attack on the Iowa. For the crew of the WWII, this was a chance to prove they weren't a complete floating circus. The procedure was simple. You go through all the motions of firing a torpedo, but you make absolutely sure the primers, the small explosive charges that eject the torpedo from its tube, are removed. No primer, no launch. The WWII's torpedo crew lined up for their mock attack. Simulated launch 1 went fine. So did the second. Then came the third. Down in the torpedo room, torpedo man Lawton Dawson was preparing the tubes. For reasons that are still debated, he forgot to remove the primer from torpedo tube number 3. On the bridge, the command was given, and to the horror of everyone watching, out of torpedo mount number 2 came the unmistakable whoosh of a live torpedo. It hit the water, and its propellers churned to life, screaming straight towards the USS Iowa and straight towards the President of the United States. What followed was pure, unadulterated chaos. On the bridge of the WWII, officers stared in frozen disbelief. They had to warn the Iowa, but they were still under strict radio silence. Their first instinct was a signal lamp, but in the panic, the signalman completely fumbled the message. First, he flashed that a torpedo was in the water, but going in the wrong direction. Then, he sent a message that simply read, "The WWII was backing up full." Finally, with no other choice, Lieutenant Commander Walter broke radio silence. "Lion, Lion, come right, come hard right," he yelled, using the Iowa's code name. On the Iowa's bridge, the message caused confusion and alarm. But there was no time. The massive 45,000-ton battleship began a gut-wrenching emergency turn. The story goes that when Roosevelt was told a live torpedo was heading for his ship, he just asked his aide to wheel his chair to the side of the deck so he could get a better look. As the president watched with detached curiosity, one of his Secret Service agents reportedly drew his pistol, as if he was going to shoot the torpedo out of the water. The Iowa's own massive guns were trained on the William D. Porter, as some on the bridge wondered if this was a bizarre assassination attempt. Just as it seemed the torpedo would strike, the Iowa's massive wake detonated it a safe 3,000 yards away. A muffled explosion was felt, and the crisis was over. The United States Navy had failed to assassinate its own president. The aftermath was swift. As soon as the convoy reached Bermuda, the USS William D. Porter was met by officials. Her crew was detained for an inquiry, an almost unheard-of event in Navy history. The ship was sequestered as a board of inquiry tried to figure out if this was treason or simply the most colossal screw-up imaginable. Torpedo man Lawton Dawson confessed he had forgotten to remove the primer. He was initially sentenced to 14 years of hard labor, but President Roosevelt himself intervened. He understood it was an accident, albeit a terrifying one, and asked that no punishment be dealt. Dawson was pardoned, and the crew was released. But the WWII would never live it down. For the rest of her service, she was a running joke. Whenever she sailed past another U.S. Navy vessel, she'd be greeted by sailors shouting, "Don't shoot, we're Republicans," a jab at Roosevelt's political party. After the torpedo incident, the Navy sent the USS William D. Porter to the Aleutian Islands, a remote, frigid chain off Alaska. The thinking was that up there, in the quiet backwater of the war, she couldn't get into much trouble. This thinking was, of course, wrong. The ship served for months in the cold, gray waters of the North Pacific on relatively uneventful patrols. But the curse was just dormant. A story that has become part of the ship's legend claims that one night, a drunken sailor decided to test fire one of the ship's main 5-inch guns. The shell supposedly landed right in the front yard of the base commandant's house during a party. While there are no official records to confirm this, the story fits so perfectly into the ship's chaotic saga that it has become an inseparable part of its lore. By 1944, with the war in the Pacific reaching its climax, every available ship was needed, even one with a reputation. The Porter was transferred to the Philippines, and then, in the spring of 1945, to the inferno of the Battle of Okinawa. Okinawa was the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. For the destroyers on radar picket duty, it was a living nightmare. They were the first line of defense, tasked with detecting incoming Japanese kamikaze raids and absorbing the first attacks. It was arguably the most dangerous job in the Navy, and it's where the USS William D. Porter was sent. And to be fair, during her time off Okinawa, the Willie D. proved she was a capable warship. She stood her picket duty bravely, warning the fleet of incoming raids. Her gunners were even credited with shooting down several enemy planes. It seemed, for a moment, that the ship might finally shake its unlucky reputation. But the curse of the Willie D. had one last spectacular act in store. June 10, 1945. The USS William D. Porter was on station off Okinawa. At 8:15 a.m., a single obsolete Japanese naval dive bomber dropped out of the clouds, completely undetected, and made a beeline for the destroyer. The Willie D.'s gunners sprang into action, filling the air with flak. They hit the plane. Trailing smoke, the kamikaze wavered. It was going to miss. The plane splashed into the water just yards from the ship's side. A collective sigh of relief went through the crew. They'd dodged the bullet, but this was the USS William D. Porter. Nothing was ever that simple. The plane's momentum carried it underwater, directly beneath the destroyer. And then, it exploded. The entire 2,050-ton warship was lifted clean out of the water by the force of the underwater blast. It hung in the air for a second before crashing back down with a sickening crunch. The impact was catastrophic. The ship's hull was broken, steam lines ruptured, and power was lost instantly. Fires broke out everywhere. For 3 agonizing hours, the crew of the Willie D. fought with everything they had to save their ship. But the damage from the bizarre subterranean explosion was too severe. The ship was sinking. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, and in a final shocking twist of fate, the evacuation was perfectly orderly. Not a single life was lost. Every crew member was rescued. 12 minutes later, the USS William D. Porter, the ship that nearly assassinated a president, heeled over and slipped stern first beneath the waves, gone for good. CTA. The story of the Willie D. is one of the most incredible and frankly hilarious footnotes in military history. It's a testament to the chaos of war and a reminder that sometimes the truth is far stranger than fiction. If you loved this wild piece of naval history, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. We've got plenty more tales of historical fails and incredible events you won't believe are true. Let us know in the comments. What's the most incredible story of military incompetence you've ever heard? The USS William D. Porter was officially struck from the Navy list on July 11, 1945. In her short, chaotic 2-year career, she earned 4 battle stars for her service in the Pacific, a testament to the fact that despite everything, she was there in the thick of the fight. The ship's story is a perfect storm of a green crew, the immense pressures of war, and a healthy dose of just plain, dumb luck. But in the end, the unluckiest ship in the Navy had one final miraculous stroke of good luck. After a career defined by endangering her own side, she was sunk by the enemy in one of the most bizarre ways imaginable, and yet every single one of her sailors survived to tell the tale. It was a perfectly ironic ending for a ship that was, from beginning to end, a complete and utter accident.